Can you see my slide?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Super. Great.
Right, so good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the 6th Talent Cafe that we've had since the middle of the year, since COVID hit us all. LinkedIn has got a new feature where you can actually pronounce your name. So I've been practicing Sandrine's name. So we are joined by Sandrine Bardot today, all the way from the UAE, originally from France. Sandrine is a compensation and benefits specialist, consulting in the area of obviously compensation and benefits, focusing on the Middle East and companies in that particular region. And today she's going to share with us beyond basic pay. I'm not going to introduce you much more than that. So if you would like to maybe give us a short background on your history and your experience, please go ahead, and then we are all ears. We have over to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, I'm Sandrine Bardot. I've been in UAE for the past 13 years. And as Cohen said, you know, with my accent, you will guess that I'm French. I have worked in many organizations my whole career of over 20 years in compensation and benefits. I've worked with companies like Philips, Apple, Airbus, Fiat, Microsoft, and I became Vice President of Performance and Reward for Majid Al Futtaim, which is one of the largest conglomerates in the GCC region. Lost my job in 2009 with the global crisis and came back to the UAE a few months later to be the VP again, the SVP of Performance and Reward for Mubadala, which was a government-owned. They call themselves sovereign wealth fund. It's more, the model is more of a private equity. We owned companies, over 60 companies in I don't even remember how many countries. And eventually I left the corporate world to set up my my consultancy and the training company where I specialize in performance and reward. And recently, Cohen and I, agreed that that I would do a presentation mostly on the motivational aspects of compensation and benefits. And so this is what I'm going to cover. I will not have slides for the whole presentation. I will not share my screen the whole presentation. Only the beginning. So we will be covering a number of things. Going from the motivation theories and then into how some of those aspects can be applied to different aspects of the performance and reward world. So basically, when we think about compensation and benefits, this is the model from World at Work, which is the largest compensation and benefits, let's say, professional body in the world. It's the US one. We see that the total reward strategy is part of a bigger system which looks at the culture of the organization and what the business wants to achieve. And of course, thereafter, how in terms of strategy, the human resources function is going to adapt. And the whole goal of that is to attract, motivate, and retain employees so that we get to better business results. Because we know that when employees are engaged and when employees are happy, they increase in terms of productivity. There is an increase in terms of the going the extra mile that they do. And this has, and it has been proven by numerous research, a positive financial impact on the organization. So when we think about what we call comp and ben, or performance and reward, or total rewards, you have a whole host of elements that come into play. You have all the compensation elements, which is basically what we say the cash that we give to an employee. You have all the benefits that you may provide for the employees, and you also have other things that are less tangible, but that are still part of how you recognize and reward people for the quality of the work that they provide. So the whole performance management, recognition, promotions, career development, and of course, what is called here the work-life element, which in today's newspeak would be more about what we call employee well-being and wellness and engagement. What does a reward strategy try to achieve? It's of course to support what are the objectives of the organization, but it's also to motivate people to have a high performance and making sure that the organization is going to retain their biggest performers. Those are the main objectives of reward strategies. So if we think in the recent years, there's been a lot happening in the world that has been affecting how we design our reward strategies. So I'm not going to cover everything, but if we think about it, there is a whole world out there where employees, as maybe if you heard before we started, I was saying employees are becoming consumer oriented. They want their experience in the workplace to be as simple and as easy as the one that they get as a customer in the real world. So that has an impact on giving constant feedback, because nowadays you see apps where you can rate immediately. If you go to a shop or if you go to a restaurant, you can give your feedback. So employees expect to be able to give and receive feedback. They expect to be listened to. They expect that things are going to be instant, you know, that if they need to learn something, they can access it instantly. They don't want to go and fill a form to say, I request a training and I need to wait for 3 months until there is budget in order to allow me to attend the training that I need to attend, and so on. What we see as well is the movement towards the gig economy, where we see more and more like contract workers, contingent workers, freelancers, and so on. And what that means is that organizations nowadays need to find ways to manage a completely different workforce than when I first started to work over 27 years ago, where most of the company employees were full-time employees, you know, and direct hires. And nowadays, what we see is that a lot of organizations reduce to what they consider to be their core, and then engage with others that are still very important for it, but are not legally linked to the organization. However, as an HR, we still need to manage those people in the sense that we want them to be aligned with what we're trying to achieve as an organization, even if we are not considered legally to be their employer and might in some countries not be allowed to give them direct orders officially. So we have to look into that. But there are also more recent changes that have been happening recently, and there's been the Me Too movement. So this is about, you know, diversity. This is under Black Lives Matter. This is about diversity and equity, inclusion, recognizing that society is more mixed than it used to be before, and requesting more transparency. And obviously with the pandemic, there have been lots of impacts. So a lot of people are starting to consider what they need to do in order to keep their employees motivated and engaged. And obviously the first instinct that most people have is to say, hey, give them an increase in the salary and they will be happy and motivated. And today I want to discuss alternatives to that and other ways to achieve engagement and motivation. Now, if you look at the model of rewards, so this is developed some years ago by Towers Watson, we see that there are like those 4 big, let's say, clusters, which are the financial rewards, as I was saying, the compensation, the benefits package, the working environment, and the growth and career opportunities. However, this model of being balanced doesn't really exist in real life because different types of employees may have different types of motivation. So for example, if you look here, an executive in there, if you look at the key here, the gray is the financial rewards, the benefits are the dark blue, in green you have the growth, and in, let's say, lighter gray, you have the working environment. If you're an executive in an organization, most of the time, your focus will be on your financial and your benefits package, because if you're an executive, you don't have that much more growth to have, and maybe your work environment is not so much of an issue. However, for example, for a blue collar person, they might be more focused on getting, you know, elements of their monthly payment that are more important for them, because they need to cater to the needs of making sure that they have enough to take care of their family. So how do we go about building rewards packages that are motivating for employees? I didn't want to jump into giving you some examples before I go through a rather extensive consideration on motivation theories, because if you understand motivation theories, then you will be better placed in order to design any system that you want to put in place. So of course, we've all heard of the most basic one, which is the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where we have physiological needs that need to be met first, so that then safety, social esteem needs, and self-actualization might be fulfilled. And in terms of Kompenben, this means that, for example, the physiological needs mean that we have salary which is enough to ensure that people can pay rent, can eat food, and survive. And actually that might sound like we don't need to discuss it, but if you think of countries like in the US, for example, they have a lot of people who have to have 2 or 3 jobs in order just to be able to pay rent, because there's not always a minimum wage in place in those in the different states in the USA. So obviously people who are at that level of pay cannot really think about, you know, growing their self-esteem or their self-actualization, because they're still struggling to meet their basic needs. So this is the first of those theories. Then there was the Herzberg theory of hygiene and motivation, and basically it says that there is job satisfaction and job dissatisfaction, and if you increase on the hygiene factors, which are, let's say, the basic factors, what you say is that you don't make people more happy, but you make them less dissatisfied. While if you focus more on the motivator factors, so you will have people who are going to be more satisfied in their job, and those would be recognition, having a job that they like, advancement, you know, giving them more responsibility, and so on. The need theory of McClelland is a little bit less known, but it has construct where we have different needs that are building throughout our life, and which is influenced by our environment, the experiences that we encounter, and the culture that we live in. And basically, it says that all motivation is a function of achievement. So the drive to be good, to be best and achieve something in a certain way. The strive for power, which is when we want to have an influence and an impact on other people. And of course, the affiliation, which is where the fact that we are social animals and we want to have good relationships with the people that are around us. Then Vroon developed the process theory, so the expectancy theory, which is basically, if I explain it very simply, if somebody will choose the behavior that they think will have the best return for them. So basically, it means that the person has a number of preconceptions in their head, okay? That if they work hard, or there will be a better performance, and that a better performance will lead to more rewards. And this is a very important theory because it's at the base of a lot of the incentive systems that companies put in place. If you think about it, a sales incentive plan, for example, is based on the premise that if you set goals for the salespeople and they strive to achieve those goals and go above and beyond, they believe And that's why they put more effort, that we will pay them, we as employers will pay them more money because they have done a better result. So they will adapt their behavior to sell the things that we tell them to sell and push those more because they want to have the result that is in their own benefit. They don't do it for the good of the organization. They do it based on their expectation that they're going to get the reward. Okay. Then in the equity theory, so this is a slightly more complicated concept. In the equity theory, basically, what happens is that people look around them and they look at the amount of effort that they've put in and the reward that they've gotten, and they compare it to what people around them are receiving, okay? So basically, they might look around them and they say, okay, I worked okay this year and I received the average reward, and the person sitting next to me also did okay and they received an okay reward. So it's fair. We both received something equivalent, so there is equity. I'm happy with that. However, they might look around them and say, hey, but this guy over there, he didn't do anything and he's still receiving the same reward as me, the same amount of bonus or the same salary increase as me, and therefore there is a perception of inequity there. So what will happen is that you might have two results out of that. If the person perceives that inequity, they might work harder the next year, so modify their behavior so that they say, okay, maybe I needed to do more in order to get a higher reward. So they will work harder in order to get the reward that they were looking at and reduce the inequity. They say, okay, I needed to give more in order to receive more. And then I will see that the other person is getting less than me because he's doing less. Or they might give up and they might say, hey, if nobody is going to reward me in a fair way, then I'm going to reduce my own output and I will not do more than the guy who's sitting next to me who's doing nothing, because anyway, in the end, we both receive the same amount. And why is that important? Because very often line managers tend to think that if they get a budget and they give a salary increase which is the same for everybody, or if they get a bonus which is the same for everybody will be happy. But that's actually not the case. And the equity theory is especially relevant for your high performers, because if they see that they work harder and they have better results, but they get the same rewards as everybody else, their motivation will fade, most likely, and they will probably stop being high performers. So you're having a potentially negative impact by doing this, sprinkling of the rewards. So it's important also that you educate the line managers on how people think, and this why the seemingly easier thing of giving the same to everybody so that nobody will complain is actually not going to be good for them in the long run. So in the goal setting theory, basically is the one which is at the basis of setting SMART objectives. When Locke did his analysis, he found that when goals are set which are SMART, measurable, that time-based, realistic, and that can drive the behavior that we are looking for. And this you will see in any type of goal setting system for your performance management has been directly implemented into performance and reward systems in many organizations, because it's a relatively simple one to understand in terms of concept. Now, the implementation, in most cases, in my personal experience, a lot of people don't really know how to set SMART objectives, but that's more a question that us as HR, we probably don't ourselves know how to do that well, and so we're not as good at enabling that in our managers and training them. So that's more a question of practice and being exposed to a good goal setting than a lack of willingness, I would say. So reinforcement theory, you've heard that, and especially if you have kids, You know that you need to provide positive reinforcement to people if you want them to repeat the behavior that you are happy with. So you will give recognition, you will give praise, you will give maybe a financial reward, you might give a promotion, and so on. So this is something that we apply in all pay for performance and recognition systems. And also we have the negative behaviors where we try to reinforce the negative elements by making it so unpleasant for the person who is displaying what we consider to be bad behavior, that we encourage them to change their behavior. Okay, so this is also useful in education theory. Okay, contingency theory is a very important one. And it's a simple one. Basically, we keep hearing all the time what is best practice coming from our management. They want to know what is the market doing, can we copy it, and how are we doing compared to that. I think that this is not necessarily the best way, because in an organization, what works best for your company, what is the best fit for your company based on your current situation, your company culture, where you are in your digital transformation, and so on, is going to be more important than having a best practice approach. Also remembering that best practice means what most people are doing in many cases, and sometimes you have to be unique, you have to be different because you have a specific challenge or you want to attract people in a specific way. So here there is a video. I'm not gonna play it now. I will send you the slides anyway, but in this slide we see that the probably some of you have heard of it, I don't know, but some capuchin monkeys are offered raisins and cucumber. They prefer raisins, okay, and the grapes. And they're given, one of them is given cucumber as a reward for recognizing a rock and giving it back to the researcher. The other one, and they can see it, the other one receives a grape. And we can see that even the capuchin monkeys understand the concept of fairness. So it's very important when we design such reward systems that we always think on the concept of fairness, because it's a basic fundamental need, not just for us humans, but if we see that even evolved animals can understand the concept of fairness, if we don't think about it when we design our own reward systems, then we're making a big mistake. Now, I want to briefly talk about neuroscience. In 2017, Richard Thaler got the Nobel Prize of Economics for his work on behavioral economics. And behavioral economics is the study of how people react, and that we are not machines. You know, traditional economics is about human beings being rational, the markets being rational, and reacting in a rational way compared to what an organization or a situation is. And actually, he demonstrated that this is not the case, and that people react in many different ways that are influenced by the brain, and how the neuroscience is proving that our brain is reacting to two different types of situations. The first one is the threats. So when our brain perceives a threat, it focuses only on that element. It has to treat it immediately at the exclusion of any other thing, because if there is a threat, it comes from the time when we were still, you know, living in the savannah. If a lion was approaching us, we had to run very quickly in order to avoid it, or we had to fight. But we had to do something, and if we didn't treat it and we ignored, we might get killed by the lion. So I'm oversimplifying, but basically our brain is really focused on managing threats. The other part of the brain is that we love rewards. Rewards trigger discharge of certain hormones like serotonin and others in our brain and makes it addictive. So when we encounter a situation that we like, it becomes nice and we want to repeat that as much as we can and try to increase the rewards because it's very pleasant for the brain. And so in the employment relationship, this also impacts very, very deeply how employees respond to the rewards and the packages that we put in place in the employment relationship. So I'm not gonna go into all elements here, but what we need to understand is that most of our thinking are based on subconscious, unconscious thoughts. There was a book written by Kahneman, which was called Thinking Fast and Slow, and which explains how in our brain there are so many things that we process in the background, and there's the fast thinking, and that helps us to operate on a daily basis, because every single day we don't need to think too much. You know, if we need to brush our teeth, we don't need to think about too much. We just do automatically the movements that are there, so that we keep the processing brain power to think about something else. So if I give you just a few examples of how this new field is impacting the world of reward, there is not much that has been written on that, but I think this is really the field of the future because it really impacts how we design rewards and so on. For example, how we understand the world around us. There is a big principle called the loss aversion principle, and basically it means that people are more scared of losing something than they are in gaining something. Okay, so basically, if you think about it, there have been some experiments in China, and I remember somewhere in the US, I think, where some teachers at the beginning of the year were told, okay, we're going to give you, let's say, for example, $1,000 now, and we're going to take it back at the end of the year if your students don't average, let's say, for example, 85% positive results on the year-end test. And there was another group of teachers who were told at the beginning of the year, we will give you $1,000 if your students reach at least 85% positive results at the end of the year. And over again, it has been proven that the teachers who were given the $1,000 in advance were consistently getting better results for their kids at the end of the year than the teachers who were promised the reward at the end of the year. Why? Because this is loss aversion. Once they had the money, they didn't want to have to give it back at the end of the year. They probably did not realize, by the way, this is all subconscious, but this motivated them. So I'm not saying that we should give bonuses to employees in advance, but if you think about it, this is something that we sometimes use. When we have a sales incentive plan, for example, we might have clawback or even a long-term incentive plan for executives. We might have clawback clauses, and those clawback clauses say, hey, we gave you an incentive payment, but we see now that some element of your performance or whatever, some criteria was not met, so we're going to take it back. And that's when, for example, if a salesperson has an excellent result one year, but that's because we know that there was a windfall. So a big client fell in their lap, but they didn't really work on it and so on. We would have a windfall clause, which means that we consider that this is not business as usual, and a clawback, which would be, oh, we are going to take away part of the bonus associated to that because that's not related to your work, for example. For incentives in a long-term incentive plan, that might show in the form of saying, hey, we give you some stock options, but you can only exercise them if the performance of the company in the next 3 years is at a certain level. And if it's not there, then we will take it away from you. You are not allowed to exercise. So basically we're saying you cannot use what we gave you. Okay, another thing that we have is the endowment bias. So that one, studies show that people value what they have more than what they don't have. So, for example, the main study there shows that if you give people a mug and you tell them how much would you sell it, if I were to tell you, okay, you have to sell it to me, people would say, I will sell it for $8. And the same mug that they would see in the shop, they would not be willing to pay more than $3 for it if they don't own it anymore. So it's an interesting one where what it means is that people value more what they have than something else, even if the new thing is better for them. So that's why it's so difficult sometimes to change some of your components of your packages, some of your benefits, some of your incentives, because if they're familiar with something, people don't want to give it up, even if you give them something better, because they feel the value of what they have is more important, more embedded in them. Another one is in communication, is the anchoring. Okay, so people use the information that they have as a reference for evaluating new information. So for example, if your employees come across another person in another company who seemingly has the same job, but they're paid more, then they will be convinced that they're being paid not enough. Okay, they're underpaid, because their reference now is that that one person is getting more, and this for them represents what the market is. So it's very important that you use that to anchor the kind of behavior that you want to see and the kind of numbers that you want people to expect, you know, so that people can see what is expected of them, what would be the best-in-class performance, and so on, and so that they can use that as a reference for their own behavior or for how they perceive what they receive. That's a very important concept which is used in so many fields, you know, like communication, advertising, and so on. Very, very powerful. Frame something. So if you think about it, you go in the shops and on sale, you see those big notes that say was $2,000 is now $600, and you go like, wow, this is a great reduction, I'm going to buy it because I'm doing a big saving. That's pure anchoring for you there, because the little piece of paper is anchored in your head that the value of the good is $2,000, when in reality it might be $7,000 and you're going to pay $600, but you don't know that because the organization has anchored the price at a higher level. And it's so powerful, for example, that in France, during the sale period in the summer, there is a law which does not allow shops to increase prices in the 1 or 2 weeks before the sale, so that to avoid that people would see an anchoring at a higher price before the sale, so that they feel that the sale is more advantageous to them. So this is even been passed into law, for example, in France. So powerful is this anchoring mechanism. And of course, there is the framing mechanism, which is how you communicate something to the employees. So for example, that will have a big impact. So for example, if you're looking at, let's say you have a savings plan in your organization, and you are offering a matching. So if the employee puts $100 on the savings plan, maybe you offer as a company a matching of also $100, let's say 100% match. So would you use a communication which says, hey, employees, you should use the savings plans, because do you know how much more you can make if you put $100? You could get an extra $100. Or should you have a communication which is, hey, employees, did you know that by not putting $100 on the savings plan, you're losing out on the $100 that the company is going to give you? Those two communications have fundamentally different results. And if you remember the loss aversion principle, you will understand that you would have probably better results by saying to the employees, oh, be careful not to leave money on the table, because they don't want to lose on something. So this is important. Another element of how you can use framing is when you're presenting choices. simpler the better. This is the basic system. So I know that we have a lot of push to have, you know, multiple options available in so many things and so on, but actually the more choices you present, the more it is difficult for people to decide. So if possible, you can make it a yes or no type of choice. But if you want to be a little bit more sophisticated and you want people to encourage people to follow a certain type of decision, you might present it with two other choices, one which is below and one which is above. And because what happens if in most cases people will choose the option which is in the middle? Why? Because they don't want to look like they're so cheap and that they're losing out. Again, the loss aversion is going to be there, but they also sometimes don't want to be having a self-perception that you know, they're overspending or they're, you know, too focused on certain let's say elements that are not mandatory and so on. So they will tend to choose the choice in the middle. So if you look at it as well, anytime you go on the internet and you end up on one of those sales pages, you know, where there are like options, for example, to take a subscription to an organization, you will see very often that the one that they call favorite and so on, and which is highlighted most, is the one which they put in the middle. Most organizations will offer a basic package, they will offer a platinum package, and they will say best gold package, you know, and that's the one in the middle. And if you present your choices like this in terms of reward management, you might be able to help people nudge them to make a choice which is good for them, okay? And easing the communication and the decision-making factor. Finally, the social proof is very important. We all know that. We've seen the success of social media. So it's very important when we are doing, introducing new benefits, or when we are introducing a sales incentive plan, that we have an element where we say, hey, those are the people who have adopted it, or those are the people who are getting the best results, and therefore we want to encourage more people to follow that. So recognition schemes will also play on that, on the social proof, by highlighting those people who have the best results and making them a role model that more people will want to follow in the organization. So before I get into maybe the next final, I'm getting to the end of my time. So I'm going to take some questions maybe before I go into the rest. The rest are more like examples and things like that, so we can discuss them in questions. Do we have any questions for me?
Sandrine, we have a saying in our practice where we say the soft things are easy. I mean, yes. The hard things are easy and the soft things are hard.
Yes, you know, that's why I always say that I don't believe that we should talk about soft skills when we should talk about people skills or human skills, because they're actually much more difficult to change and to learn than the technical skills. Technical skills, anybody with a bit of patience and hard work can learn, but the soft skills, so-called soft skills, are actually hard. Yeah, I agree. I agree.
And what you're saying there in terms of communicating and the way that you're communicating, Craig, you've got your video on. I know that the 21st Century has been doing a total reward statement where you basically show the employees exactly what they're getting in terms of their benefit, you know, not just sort of the money that gets transferred into your bank account at the end of the day, or the end of the
And that's a good principle of anchoring there, because when you put a value, I remember a few years ago when I was still in the corporate world, in my the area where I was working, there were lots of parking spaces that were for free because there were like some lots that were not built yet. And then the municipality came in and put in, you know, the parking fees. And all of a sudden, everybody was fighting to get an access into the parking of the organization, which nobody had valued before. But all of a sudden, because employees had to pay 300 dirhams, so that's like $75 a month for parking, all of a sudden people valued it. It was not valued before, but by putting a monetary value on it, it was like, and people were actually, you know, trying to negotiate. I didn't drive. I was working, walking to the office. I used to live close by, and I had 12 people come to me from the HR team saying, "Hey, Sandrine, are you using your parking lot? Could you give me your card?" You know, that was they had never asked before. So yeah, that's very true. And I think the total reward statements help for that. For people to understand the value of what they're getting and be more motivated by that. And we see that also in recognition schemes as well. I truly believe in the power of recognition schemes. So I don't know how it is in your area of Africa, but in my part of the world, recognition schemes are not always handled by HR. Sometimes it's the internal communication teams that is handling it. And sometimes within HR, it's the talent management team, not the comp and ben team. But I have to say that most of the time I've seen better results from recognition schemes when they were driven by the comp and ben team than by the rest of the organization, because the comp and ben would take more of a look of how do we use that as a complement in our employee value proposition, as a complement to all the other benefits that we're doing, and what are some of the behaviors that we are not driving enough through the, let's say, proper incentives, for example, and that we still want to recognize, or that we are not rewarding at all and that we want to recognize as well. So you get a lot of result when you have a very well-designed recognition scheme for a very low cost compared to maybe other elements such as a bonus scheme or a sales incentive plan or a retention scheme, for example. So, and that would affect more employees than a retention scheme, which is very targeted, for example.
Yeah. Greg, did you want to add something?
I actually wanted to ask a question, if that's okay. And I agree with you on the recognition. We often see a decentralized approach. As long as there's ownership there, otherwise it just works in pockets. That's where we see it falling over in our regions. But my question is more on the performance management side, Sandrine.
Yes.
And it was wonderful revisiting models that I haven't seen in a while, and then looking at human behavior. But I'd love to get a view from you. In how many organizations where pay is differentiated on value add, have you seen that being run effectively without a performance management system? I'd love to get your view.
Okay, so shall I make the assumption that what you call the performance management system is the traditional one where you set an objective at the beginning of the year, you have a mid-year review, and then at the end of the year there's a performance evaluation, and that is used as one of the factors for somebody to get a salary increase or maybe a bonus or an incentive.
Correct.
I have seen organizations have the new models in place of performance management very successfully, in the sense that you would still have objectives, but it would be based on the more constant feedback. So like maybe you have weekly check-ins between the employee and the manager, and then you have a monthly, what we call performance snapshot. And I've implemented that with some of my clients. It's usually, and it's based on an article from the Harvard Business Review from 2014 or 15, I don't remember, which was looking at what Deloitte was doing at the time, moving away from performance ratings. I don't believe in the whole approach that they had implemented. I don't think it was necessarily best. But this performance snapshot of saying once a month or at the end of a project, you know, if it's at least once a quarter, would I want to give the biggest salary increase to that person? Would I want to keep that person on my team? Would I want to, is this person ready for promotion or no? And you keep that, and you have 12 of those given out by the direct line manager, maybe by a project manager if it's based on a specific project, and potentially in a matrix organization by the functional manager as well. You end up having quite a lot of data points that you can easily translate in the background into an equivalent system to a performance rating of 1 to 5, or underperformer to outstanding performer. So you can relatively easily translate that to help you drive the decision making in terms of the financial aspect, and focus more on the motivation. I want to highlight one thing which I haven't mentioned in the psychological things, but this approach of having those questions which are, would I want to keep that person on my team? Would I want to give them the biggest salary increase? Would I want to give them a bonus? Is asking the manager how they would react, because it's based on the principle of idiosyncrasy, which is where we know best how we react rather than other people react. So it's better to ask the manager what he would do rather than what the person has achieved. And it's still about the performance of the employee, but you get a much more accurate result then, because the person is asked how they would react, and they tend to be less normative in their answers of rating everybody, either above the expectations or everybody in the middle of the expectations. So you get a more realistic view. And by having that also expanded to project managers or functional managers, if you're in a matrix organization, you might even get the added benefit of having multiple raters into your system. So you're not in a 360, but you get a little bit of diversity. And the monthly performance snapshots also allows you to avoid one of those challenges, which is the recency bias, which we all joke about at the end of the year, which is, hey, don't upset the boss, otherwise your performance rating is going to be down, even if you did a great job throughout the year. So that also eliminates some of that aspect by the end of the year. Combined with the frequent performance discussions throughout the year, it almost eliminates the need for the one big 1.5 hour conversation with each employee at the end of the year, because those conversations have been split into multitude of smaller conversations. And it also helps to align with the employee needs for frequent feedback, and also gives an opportunity to correct course earlier in the year if something is not going well, and gives a chance for the manager to really act as a coach and as a resource. And as I call it in French débloqueur. It means the person who unblocks situations by either opening the door to have an access to somebody who can, who's blocking a decision, which is blocking a process or something, or getting access to a resource, getting access to a training, getting access to a new way of thinking or something like that. So that's how I see it. It's not perfect. I think it relies a lot on managers being fully educated, and so on HR focusing a lot on educating managers that their job is not to give orders, but their job is to be performance coach and to bring value to the organization. Because if my team fails, I fail, because my own objectives are tied to that of my team. So that would be it.
There's 2 questions in the chat box. The first one, I think, is a double question. Yeah. How do you have a performance management system, so basically pay for performance, but to maintain gender pay balance?
I don't think that those are necessarily need to be linked. I think the pay balance needs to be looked at from different ways. It's also about the job gradings, the type of jobs that are accessible to so if we're talking gender, to women. It's about making sure that equal pay, equal performance gets equal pay, and equal pay for the same job. It's about having solutions in place that do not disadvantage females or males who go on parental leave when there is a kid, because that puts the career on hold. And so many times you see managers using the opportunity of saying, oh, this woman is going on maternity leave, I need to give one person on my team an underperformer rating, she's going to get it because she's not going to be here for the rest of the year, or something like that. And sometimes the fathers also get affected by that if they take the parental leave, if there is parental leave in your organization. The performance management system in itself, I don't think that it is biased. It's the people who are biased. So you have to also educate managers, and awareness of bias is the first step, and really has a huge impact. And actually, if you go online, Google has a whole website which is called Rework. And on Rework, there is a section on that which is about reducing bias in management, and that's in recruitment and performance evaluation and so on. One of the things that managers need to be aware of is that what we tend to do is that, and we all do, even females, tend to evaluate women on a different set of criteria than men. Men are evaluated on outcomes and hard facts, and women are more evaluated on their attitude and their behavior. And obviously, in some cases, people have some form of bias that if a woman behaves more like a man, she's being perceived as being bossy, for example. Okay, I was looking for a nice word to say. So we have to be aware, and without awareness, we cannot fight it. So I think it's more about that. The system in itself is not necessarily biased, it's the people. So we need to work with the people to make them realize and try to reduce that in how they're doing. And there are tools that we can use, simple tools. You can run, performance statistics based on gender. They can be based on grade and so on, to try and see before the performance ratings are final that you're not advantaging or disadvantaging a certain group of employees.
Thank you. There's another question. Martin wants to find out about non-monetary rewards, also in the chat box.
Yeah.
Maybe how do you highlight or allocate non-monetary awards in this sort of time of economic hardship?
I would say absolutely try to focus on a recognition scheme, which is called a peer-to-peer recognition scheme, which is where employees, and nowadays the systems are very easy to implement. Everybody has a mobile phone, and you can have it on the mobile phone. And those systems are based on employees recognizing other employees. It's not just the traditional recognition scheme where you have an employee of the year, or the best teammate, selected by the manager. They're gamified, so you can send badges, and there's a wall a little bit like on your Facebook where you can say, hey, thank you so and so for helping me to achieve this. You can create specific rewards for a specific team. For example, if one is working on a project, they might create a number of badges related to some aspects of that project, and that helps a lot. And then you can link to those, potentially getting some points, which might translate into, I don't know, getting access to experiences, to vouchers, to extra days off, whatever the person wants. But even if you don't do that, just the fact of having that social performance, the social element of peer-to-peer recognition, not just the traditional top-down type of recognition, is going to have a huge impact on the organization, because we live in communities, and it also helps you to reinforce the behaviors that you want to be seen more in the organization, like teamwork, empathy, supporting one another, stepping up when somebody is sick, all this kind of stuff. You might be able to recognize when there is not necessarily a specific dedicated space in your incentive. So that's where the non-financials are going to come to play. And typically, an organization budget for the non-financial rewards on average would be 1% of salaries, can go up to 2%, excluding the cost of implementing the software. But that is based on, typically it's a software as a service solution. So it will cost you, I don't know, $2, $3, $5 per month per employee or something like that. So directly correlated to the size of your employee population. And I think those are super effective.
Good. Well, we've run out of time. We have 1 minute left. I think we can listen to you all day long, and I'm sure there are plenty more questions. But I think if we leave it there, thank you so much for sharing with us today. If there are any more questions from the team, please let me know, or you can even email Sandrine directly with any questions. And maybe we should invite you back for another session. We've had a great sessions. Questions. Since a Friday is in any case a weekend with you, I think we can have a session every Friday.
Yes, well, maybe not. I also want to relax on my Fridays.
Thank you so much. I've unmuted everybody. If you can say thank you and goodbye, then we will see you again in 2 weeks' time.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much, Sandrine.
Thank you. Bye.
Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye. Thank you, Mr. Welsh.
Thank you.